Hello viewers, welcome to Daily Politics. I am Hamza Idris. Has Nigeria's security situation improved? Well, this is left to be seen as Nigeria's security forces have been claiming successes that recorded following the neutralization and dislodging of bandits and terrorist elements, recovery of large cache of arms and ammunition, among others. However, it is barely a month to the inauguration of the new government, and the questions such as what will be the legacy of the Buhari presidency in terms of security be? Did it leave the state of the nation's security better than it met it? What will be the agenda for the new government, and how much needs to be done to either consolidate existing efforts or re-strategize? This will form tonight's conversation as we are joined by Dr. Kabiru Adamu. He is the Managing Director of Beacon Consulting, which provides enterprise risk security management solutions in Nigeria. Welcome to the program, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Malaham. I'm delighted to be here again.
Thank you, yes. We will take a short break, and when we return, the conversation commences. Don't go away. Yes, welcome back. Doctor, this morning there was upset around Riom, which is actually the gateway to Jos, the Plateau State capital. You heard of it?
Yes, of course I did.
Okay. Your taps are almost there. What really happened based on your findings?
Yeah, from what we heard, communities in about a couple of towns in Jos South local government and Barikin Ladi local government from Riom and surrounding neighborhoods were angered by recent spate of attacks. The most recent one was over the weekend on Sunday, where gunmen suspected to be armed Fulani militia raided.
That was the claim by the locals.
That was the claim by the
It has not been proven by security operators.
Definitely.
Okay.
So they raided some communities, killed some of the residents, and so this morning they brought out the corpses of the killed persons, put them on the link road between, for anyone who knows that route, if you leave Abuja and you're going to either Jos, the Plateau State capital, or places like Bauchi, or even further up
to Chad, Cameroon.
Exactly. So
you
have to pass through that route. So anyway, they blocked that route in protest, and sadly, as normally happens when such situations occur, they targeted some of the commuters, perhaps on the basis of their identity or profile. And but the good thing is security forces immediately deployed, and they were able to take control of the situation and have brought it to some level of normality. However,
it's a time bomb.
It is a time bomb. The fact that the perpetrators of that act have not, the act that led to...
That is the Sunday incident. Some say 7 people were
have not been arrested, have not been made public. Then the likelihood of a reoccurrence is extremely high. Let's not forget that apart from the presence of police and military in Plateau State, there is the ongoing Operation Safe Haven. And if I'm right, that operation has been ongoing for probably more than 10 years. I can't remember the exact number of years, but it's one of the longest running operations in...
It has become the normal thing in Nigeria, ad hoc thing to become permanent.
Exactly. So the reason why I brought this up is you would think that with this presence of security operations, that things like that will not happen in the States. Sadly, the complexity of the challenge, the security challenge in Plateau State, due to the divisions that have already, crept in. Even during the immediate last election, ethnicity and religion played a role. And what we don't want, and we are hoping that that is not what will happen, is that these two elements, ethnicity and religion, will begin playing a role like they did before the current Governor Lalong, because he did extremely well in terms of establishing structures that breached the gap that existed before he came to power. So the peace committee that he set up, in fact, I think he's the only state government that organizes and celebrates a national either peace or reconciliation day. So we're hoping that these are some of the things that the incoming government will embrace. He may have made some mistakes, no doubt, but there were positive things he did. I've mentioned this peace building committee.
Exactly.
He established early warning systems.
Yes.
Now, I think what did...
And most importantly, he carried actually
everybody along. Inclusion.
Nationalities.
It was a government of inclusion.
Yes.
Inclusivity. So I'm hoping that this incoming administration at the state level will also do the same. I wanted to mention the early warning systems that he had established. The challenge was that the early warning systems were there, but they were not incorporated into the federal early response systems. Now, because security...
It was actually domesticated around...
within the state.
Okay.
Now, because security is still in the exclusive list, the armed forces and the other law enforcement agents that have weaponry are still under the control of the federal government. So if at the state level you have effective and efficient early warning systems and you don't integrate them into the federal system, then your response capability will be very low. Now, if an attack occurred on Sunday and the perpetrators have not been arrested, when running an investigation, we want to find out, did the community report it? If they reported it, how come the law enforcement agencies did not deploy immediately, either to prevent that attack or to arrest the perpetrators when it happened? So those are the kind of things that I expect, the discussions that I expect to hear, that I'm not hearing. And then we can now put pressure, perhaps, on the federal government to say, okay, these are the gaps that need to be blocked. And one of the things I'm hoping to see post-May 29, 2023, is this gap that exists between state governments and federal government is breached, so that communities can feel the effect of security. Then we'll stop having road blockages like the one we see.
Now, what is the essence of the road blockage? Because most of those caught up, they were not even aware that something happened on Sunday, and then they found themselves in a tight corner, because some, if I had to come back to Abuja, some had to...
Some have died, sadly.
Oh my God.
Their property has been destroyed. Sadly, we picked up several that have been...
so unfortunately, Doctor, this thing happened on Sunday. Today is Tuesday. How did even the people who were actually aggrieved found their way? I mean, to Wednesday. Today is Wednesday. How did they found their way to the main road to now display corpses?
There are failures of intelligence. I can bet it that there are SSS officials within those communities. Apart from SSS officials, there are police divisions. When such mobilizations are happening, if you have good intelligence collection capabilities, you will pick them up. Now, there's freedom of association in Nigeria. Yes. You can't stop any community, any individual from grouping themselves. But where that grouping would produce security challenges, then you have to find a way to either limit it or prevent it from creating that security challenges. So there's a failure of intelligence there. Now, we're assuming that the intelligence was not generated and that it wasn't shared. Now, if it was generated and it was shared, and then there was a failure of action, because we're in a transition. Government sometimes during transition, gaps develop. If that is the case, then we have to urge the incumbent administration that they haven't handed over yet.
Yes.
They're in the last lap, and that last lap may determine how we rate them. So let them not think that, oh, the elections are over, we're going to hand over to a new government. What we were doing before that led to applause should be abandoned. No. They should continue until that last day when they hand over to the new administration. But suffice to say, it's a failure of intelligence or failure to act on that intelligence. And then more importantly, the peace-building mechanisms that would have prevented such an action. I don't blame them really for the action because it has brought attention to their plight. What I blame them for is carrying actions or attacks on innocent
transfer aggression of sorts,
exactly
in security palace.
They can do their protest. They can draw attention to the activity. If you read our reports consistently, our monthly security reports, we highlight that fact that communities actually use protest to draw attention to their activity.
You see, Doctor, this incident in in Jos or in Plateau State today has actually captured the attention of the media, not even local, but international media, because I've been monitoring because of the sensitivity and sensibilities of the parties
Plateau State in
involved.
Particular.
Yeah, and when you now just say Jos, what crops up your Google search is just this incident. Some people have started making a nexus between the election, which you mentioned earlier, and this time around it was won by PDP, you know, and when we had the serious issues the other time, it was not APC. Now some people are saying this is just the result of the last election. I'm sorry to say this, but you are a security expert. We have to draw the attention of people because we know the number of people that have been killed in Plateau State in the last 2 decades. It's just
I mean, it's very simple to explain and show that under the administration of Governor Lalong,
yes,
he has succeeded in the main in taming the monster of civil strife that the plateau used to be. Yeah, there were incidents, and sadly covering places like Jos South, Barikinlad local government, Mangu to an extent. And then I think the border area between Taraba and Plateau State. I remember when Fulani settlements were being attacked in those parts. Now, it would be really, really sad for us to go back to those days when it was almost on a daily basis that you had one or the other form of civil strife in the plateau. I think it would be really unfortunate. Like I mentioned earlier on, there are some positive things that Governor Lalong did. He may have made some mistakes in some areas, but I think it is incumbent on the incoming administration to take up some of those positive things. I've talked about the peace initiative, the early warning systems. I've also advised that they should incorporate that early warning systems into the federal early response systems. All of these are positive developments. Inclusivity, carry everybody along. During the inauguration of the victory speech of the governor-elect, there were some statements, not by him, but by people before him, that I felt were not really
complimentary.
And especially for him. At the end of the day, what matters is Plateau State, yes, has its peculiarities, but Plateau State is part of the enclosure called Nigeria. And if him, as a governor, is going to be recognized
as part of Nigeria,
as part of leadership, and hopefully build upon what he would sow in Plateau State, then he has to be nationalistic. And there are some leaders, state governors, that attempted to rule by isolation. And he has seen the result. Even their people rejected them.
It was
I don't want to mention their name. During the last elections, some of them attempted to go for senatorial positions. They were rejected by even their own people.
Honestly, I will mention it because we did an editorial here in Daily Trust. Benue is a good example.
So it is left for him to choose the path of growth, go by inclusivity.
And that was what actually gave edge to Lalong in 2015 when former Governor Jonah Jang, because we have to call a spade in programs like this so that leaders will learn lessons that they cannot eat their cake
and have it.
Because Lalong wrote on
the platform of
inclusivity, and that was how he won.
The 3 elements of diversity, equity, and inclusivity. You must, as a leader, do your utmost best to exercise those 3 things.
So Muftuang should see Benue as an example.
Exactly.
And he should also remember what happened to Jang during his time.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. So about capacity, and then the other thing you wanted to mention.
Diversity, equity, and inclusivity.
Okay.
It is absolutely important that any leader, especially in a multi-ethnic, multi-religious state, like the Plateau and several other North Central states. And in fact, the modern approach to leadership promotes these 3 points: equity, diversity, and inclusion. Once you do that as a leader, then believe me, you would have provided the platform for peace to reign in your state. But the moment you jettison any of these 3, and the likelihood
it's a reciprocal
for
chaos.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kabiru Adamu, for doing justice to this existential problem.
It is an existential
around Plateau
problem.
State. Yes. Now, moving to the subject of discussion today, of course, security. You released the result of March, and I mean the report of
March 2023
security reports. Maybe we should start with that and then make a comparison with 2022. I mean, first quarter of 2022, and then because this, 2023.
Thank you. So,
I think we have the reports also on the screen there. The figures are there to help us do justice to everything. I would allow the floor for you, honestly, to.
Thank you. So, as we can see on the screen, we released our report for March 2023, but even more importantly, we released the first quarter report. First quarter comprises January, February, and March 2023. Yes. So as we can see from the bar charts there, the gray color represents events. In other words, the incidents that we monitored over the period. So for
it may be attack?
Yes, there are several events. So it could be attack, it could be armed conflict, it could be inter-community violence like the one that happened in Plateau State. There are 13 different ones of them that we record and that form what we call events or incidents. Then the light shade of blue represents abductions, while the darker shade of blue represents fatalities. So starting from 2023, in the month of March, what we recorded was 375 events, and then 208 abductions, and then 749 fatalities for the month of January.
And fatalities, maybe you shed more light, meaning non-state actors, individuals.
Exactly. The only thing we don't include there are our security forces. As a policy in Beacon Consulting, we don't include security forces when they are killed.
Oh,
yes,
you don't include
as a policy.
Is that it's a policy?
It's a deliberate policy, and our reason is this: we set out to promote peace, and not to create confusion or issues within the polity. And so where you start giving out that kind of statistics, it creates more challenges. However, we do have it.
And it demoralizes. Yeah, but you keep it.
We have it. We have it. And whenever...
At the back end,
exactly,
maybe, of your...
Whenever, for instance, security forces are interested, we can make it available to them. On one or two occasions, we've been contacted and we make it available. But to make it public, we do not think it's in the interest of what we are doing to promote peace and development within the country.
Okay, now to the data,
so that's for January, and then for February, it's almost the same thing. We saw a dip, events, 375, so a reduction of events. And then for abductions, 208, further reduction from 605. So almost a 60% reduction in abduction in February. And then for fatalities, we also saw a reduction, 749. Sorry, and this is comparison rather between January and 2022 and January 2022.
Yes, and that is what we're actually interested in.
Exactly. So clearly, as you can see, if you just pick fatalities in January, you would see that in 2022, you had 1,202 deaths.
Yes.
While in January of this year, you had 749 deaths. So there is a reduction.
Okay.
Yeah. But let's go to March, which is the month that we did our last report. So in the month of March 2022, we recorded 1,497 deaths for that period.
Oh my God.
While for abduction, we recorded 702 abductions. How about in 2023? In the March 2023, we recorded 411 abductions. So if you compare it to 702 in the year 2022, you would see almost a 40-50% reduction in abductions. Now for fatalities, we recorded 954 for the month of March. If you compare it to the 1,400, also almost a 50% reduction. So there has been improvement. The challenge, however, if you do month to month in 2023, if you do month to month, in January, we recorded a fatality figure of 749 in the month of January. By February, it had increased to 624. And then
this was a prelude to election.
Prelude to election. Sorry, it had increased to 800. Just a moment, 749 for the month of March 2023. However, by March, it had increased to 954. So clearly, what we saw in the first quarter is January, a reduction when you compare it to December. But then by February, we saw a reduction. And then by March, we saw an increase. Now we can discuss why. Why are we seeing this?
That is the next question. Why this
fluctuations in figures? Election was one of the reasons. In January, there was massive deployment of security forces, and this was following a presidential directive. The president directed all the security forces, especially the military, to use every means within their disposal to ensure they provide the right environment for elections to hold. So we saw the police, as an example, deploying 300,000 personnel. The military did not tell us how many, but they really did. They launched what they call Operation Safe Corridor. And then, of course, all the other security agencies too, both law enforcement, intelligence, deployed. And the EFCC, the ICPC, all of them, they all deployed. And so that reduced the capacity of the threat elements, especially the non-state armed groups, to move around and to carry out the type of attacks and incidents that we were recording. And that's why you saw that dip in February. Of course, elections, the first phase of the elections held February 25th, and then by March 18th, the second phase of the elections held. So immediately after the second phase, I think a few days after, that deployment was pulled back. Most of those
to where? We keep asking this.
Back to their bases. Back to their bases.
Is it that they should go to their barracks and continue sleeping?
No. Sadly, some of them back to VIPs who can pay for it. Others for special duty operations that they were
banks, oil companies,
before and all that.
But can't the government say, let's sustain this offensive for 6 months and see whether we can demystify this monster?
I think it's doable with addressing the three elements of security sector governance. That's something I want us to talk about. Security sector governance, which is the glue that brings security together. If any government is going to get it right in the security sector, then it has to look at security sector governance. Now, there are three elements that are very important in security sector governance: coordination, collaboration, and cooperation. If you don't have these three elements, then no matter what you do, it will be tantamount to attempting to fetch water with a basket.
You'll end up with nothing.
You have a leakage in a bucket, and then you are just dropping the bucket thinking the leakage will stop. For us to get it right, we have to look at security sector governance from the lens of our democratic aspirations. In other words, what kind of oversight, what kind of nexus are we going to establish within the security sector to allow these three C's that I've mentioned to occur? Cooperation, coordination, and collaboration.
But why is it difficult to have it?
I think we've not been approaching it from that angle. Currently, and I want to be very careful in what I'm going to say. It's quite sensitive. There are 5 coordinating elements within the security sector at the moment: the Office of the National Security Advisor, the Ministers of Defense, Ministers of Interior, Ministers of Police Affairs, and the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, and then 6 actually, and the Secretary, the Chief of Staff.
Is it DSS?
No, the Chief of Staff to the President.
Okay, the Chief of Staff.
So those are the 6 coordinating elements within the security sector at the moment. Now, just to give you an example of why we didn't get it right, take policing as just one aspect of our security sector. The police in Nigeria today is so balkanized.
Sad.
And I'm using that word consciously. It has been so balkanized, starting from the Obasanjo administration when he created NSCDC, to the NDLEA. All those are elements of policing. We have EFCC, we have ICPC, but this is not even the challenge. It's okay to have this division.
Maybe to provide jobs or
no. If, for instance, we feel that is the way we want to go, let's do it like that. But the irony is this: why had all of this policing MDAs, I'll use that word for them, ministries, departments, and agencies, why are they now under different ministries?
Instead of being maybe under
the same ministry.
Yeah, maybe defense or what?
No, interior as an example.
Interior, yeah.
Because I talked about coordination, cooperation, and collaboration.
Yes.
Now, if you have them in these different ministries, it will be very difficult to coordinate their activities.
Yeah.
So every day you bring in...
Because they are compartmentalized.
Exactly. And the Orunsanya report talked about delineation and then merging some of these organizations together. Road safety as an example, it is an element of the police. But where is it today? Under which ministry is it? You know, so this is part of the challenge, that when we talk of security sector governance, we need a leader who would look at security from that approach. Otherwise, I'm sorry to say, Malam Hamza, we'll continue spending money on security and we will not get it right. And this is just one element that I've just given you one example of several others that we can talk about. We're in a public space, so I'm mindful of what...
Yeah, but you see, because we are in a transition period, and that is why we deliberately chose this moment
to talk about...
Because the president-elect is back. Immediately he came back, I didn't hear anything about security. What we're hearing about is actually appointments, you know, National Assembly and all that. While people like, look at it now.
No, I can tell you,
you know, people killed.
I can tell you that reading his manifesto, which is called The Renewed Hope, he has prioritized security. Himself and Kashim Ibrahim, they've prioritized security.
Kashim
Shettima, sorry.
Yes.
In that document, Renewed Hope, they highlighted 7-point agenda which they are going to address. And as a security specialist expert, I'm quite happy with what I have seen. However, there are 1 or 2 areas, including this security sector governance, that I didn't hear enough mention of. So I'm hoping that whenever they are ready, in other words, to start implementing some of the recommendations contained in that 7-point agenda, that they would also add this security sector governance.
Okay, I will plead that you hold your breath because you will mention them so that they will hear when we discuss. But we'll go on a break. Viewers, we will be back shortly. Stay with us. Welcome back. If you are just joining us, this is Daily Politics on Trust TV. Do well to follow the conversation across our social platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and follow us live on YouTube. We still have Dr. Kabiru Adamu from Bacon Consult in the studio, and we're discussing security situation in March, making comparison with what happened the year before, that was 2020. And at the same time, contextualizing issues at the moment, which is transition to another government. You said there are 2 things that you expected the incoming administration to also put, even though you commended them for having
a 7-point
roadmap for their government in respect to security. What are those 2 elements?
So security sector governance is number 1. And just to expand on security sector governance, I've spoken a little bit about it.
Yes.
It's the glue that brings everything security together. That is what security sector governance is. It talks about the kind of strategy you have, the kind of policy you have, the appointments you make, and then of course, what is the essence of that appointment. And we already have a lot of these ingredients that would lead to a good security sector governance. But I also want to emphasize that it's not just the role of the executive. So for this government to get it right, they have to create some kind of nexus between the objective of the executive and the objective of the parliament.
Okay, they have to be on the same page.
They have to be on the same page. It's absolutely important, and I'll explain part of what I mean. The challenge. One of the challenges that the Buhari administration had is the laws upon which some of the security issues were managed were moribund. People have not sat down to ask themselves, why is Nnamdi Kanu being tried for terrorism?
He shouldn't be, you think?
Is that his offense? You get why?
His offense ought to be treason, or?
As an example.
As an example, okay.
So if you attempt to try somebody for an offense and then you are finding it difficult, then something is wrong with your charges.
Yeah, and maybe I think they tried the technicalities and they could not.
And not only him, the leader of IMN. So these are critical issues. People have not looked at it beyond the surface. Is it because our laws are moribund and there are some offenses, as an example, that we've not been...
But we keep creating laws like the anti-terrorism?
Not creating, but revising them or reviewing them to update them. No country should be static from that point of view.
Because laws are not cast in stone.
Exactly. They
are meant to guide human endeavors.
Exactly. The Terrorism Prevention Act was reviewed and updated because there were certain components of it that were not appropriate or relevant.
Like the cyber components.
Exactly. And then the Terrorism Financing Act recommendations came from our partners across the world, and we needed to, and we've done that. So the same thing with some of our other laws. We need to look at those laws, and it is not the job of the executive arm of government. It is the job of the legislature, the parliament. So you see the part that I mean, that it has to be a concerted effort by not just the executive arm, but the parliamentary arm of government and us, especially the media, as the fourth estate of the realm. You have to put them
even though they keep lashing.
Well, we should never give up. It is our country. We have no other country, so we would continue to put pressure.
But doctor, don't you think if the legislators are carried away by constituency project or oversight function and all that the executive should initiate bills, or private citizens like you and me should initiate bills so that we fine-tune some of these
now, yes, I agree with you. Every citizen, every component of the society has the right and can initiate bills. But if the legislature's philosophy behind security is not in tune with our requirements, then we're not going to have those bills passed into law.
Yeah.
I'll give you a very good example. And kudos to President Buhari. Most people don't see it from this lens. The Commission for Small Arms and Light Weapons. Do you know how long the parliament has been attempting to pass that law? As far as I remember, since the 8th Assembly. In fact, probably even before the 8th Assembly.
Wow.
There has been...
But it kept bouncing back.
Even this 9th Assembly
have
attempted severally to pass that law. But I can bet you that assembly has a lifespan of just about maybe 3 or 4 weeks remaining.
Yeah, so very unlikely.
Very unlikely that.
But is there anything?
So what the president did is he
vetoed
an executive, not really an executive order, and he has set up, as it were, a mini office within the office of the National Security
to have
Advisor.
His way.
And then we are seeing
avoid the legislative technicalities.
And we're seeing the effect of that office. Several times you see the police handing over weapons to them, and they are now carrying out the functions of that commission.
So what I'm asking is what is really the problem? Why are they afraid to pass it? Are there some provisions?
It's not afraid. There are so many technical challenges, and I'm using my word now diplomatically within the parliament. Number one is the bill passing process. It's complex and cumbersome, and for good reason. You don't want laws that would be,
will entrap the whole system.
Exactly, or that would even be passed lackadaisically.
Yeah,
and that would have half-baked laws that would create more challenges. So the process is quite cumbersome, and it has to go through several places. And I'm sorry to say, corruption has also crept into the process itself. So another challenge is also the capacity of the lawmakers. Security is a very complex and technical area. Most people don't realize that. Most people see security from the lens of private guards. You have a guard in your gate, and you think that security
is beyond that.
It's beyond that, of course. Security is quite complex. It requires a lot of technicalities. Even former governors who are appointed chairmen of committees within the parliament recognize that they need more than that. So part of the challenge that I've seen is in the appointment of their aides. You don't expect everybody to be an expert in all fields. But if you are made a chairman of a committee on security, the least I expect you to do is to have an aide who is also an expert in security. Sadly, we're not seeing that.
There is a disconnect.
Exactly. So most of the aides don't have that capacity. Now they have staffers, clerks of those committees. They themselves do need the knowledge. A lot of them don't have that knowledge. If you go to the Legislative Institute as an example, the capacity to train in security is also quite deficient. So these are some of the challenges that does not allow the type of passing of laws that would be relevant to our current democratic aspirations. I'm hoping that the 10th Assembly will take note of this. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with appointment. You can appoint anyone you want within any chairmanship of any position. And I must also comment not just the 8th Assembly, but the 9th Assembly. Almost all the assemblies that I can remember in the last few years have made security a priority. So when they list this legislative agenda, security will feature.
Yeah, and it has guzzled
a lot of money.
Trillions of naira.
Under the 8th Assembly and the 9th Assembly, and in fact the current chairman of the 9th Assembly, who is the Senate President, both when he was in the 8th Assembly and now as the chairman of the Assembly, has organized security retreats to find solutions. It would give you an idea of how he has prioritized security. I have severally heard from him how he has prioritized security, and he has done amazingly well in terms of galvanizing his colleagues to address some of the security challenges. But beyond that individual and I would say administrative aspirations, there is an institutional mechanism that needs to be tweaked. And I've given you some of the...
yes, like this civil defense...
No. My point is, like when the committee chairman, they need to, their capacity to understand the security sector needs to be improved. So I'm hoping that the next chairman of the 10th Assembly understands that appoint anyone you want there, but make sure he or she has aides that have the capacity. Make sure the legislative institution has the capacity to train not just the aides and the parliamentarians, but also their aides on security matters. Now, all of this, we're talking about security sector governance. And I made the point that there has to be coordinated effort between the executive arm and the legislative arm of government. If we do all of this, then we would see an improvement. And then finally, the Attorney General of the Federation. He has a huge role to play, not just in ensuring where the legislature, as an example, does not review those bills or prompting them and nudging them, but in also advising the presidents. Whenever bills have been passed and submitted to the president for his assent, he usually falls back to the Attorney General. So if you have an Attorney General who understands and prioritizes security, then you would have a seamless process where even before the laws are passed, there will be handshakes between the legislature and the executive arm of government, so the passing of the laws will be seamless and all of that. So security sector governance is very important. Is wide. The second point I wanted to mention is bridging the gap between the federal and the state government. One of the easiest ways to conceptualize this is the decentralization of security. It has already happened.
It has happened? In
reality.
Formally?
No.
Okay.
In reality, it has happened. In
theory?
In constitutional terms, it is yet to happen. There is no state that you go to that does not have a state-level security creation.
Yes, like
there is no state that does not collect security vote. So it has happened. What hasn't happened is for us to amend,
to institutionalize, and to say that it is part and parcel of
the Constitution.
So are you an advocate of it?
Decentralization of security. Some people misinterpret decentralization to mean state policing. There are two different things. Decentralization of security would mean incorporating the state governors into the security architecture so that they have a say in how we manage our security. It's different, for instance, from saying create state police. No.
You still also believe that creating state police is a recipe for chaos, especially for some governors that are actually out to hunt people who do not share some identities.
Exactly. I think we need to strengthen our democratic traditions at the state level, make sure we have state assemblies that can check the excesses of governors, and then we would now be ripe enough for state policing. Right now, we don't have that.
Now
we have governors that are emperors, actually.
Yes, talking about taking this policing, as you put it in security terms. Last week, Kaduna State government released its report. In fact, something happened. We were working on data here at the Daily Trust, and when the figures came from Kaduna, we had to now of course, our data, you know, as a news outlet, you know, is based on reportage. But they are all, you know, they are privileged information from security operatives, the military, police, and all that. For instance, I think abductions, yeah, over 700 in Kaduna. But my takeaway from the presentation was where the Commissioner for Home Affairs said that they hope contiguous states will also adopt their own pattern of monitoring security operations, because assuming those sister states have also done this, they wouldn't have been where they are at the moment. Do you share his views on this?
Absolutely. I have this philosophy or mantra that I say security agencies in Nigeria have a morbid fear for data, and Governor Rufai has broken that
jinx.
Yes, he has. And by breaking that jinx.
But how did he do it? They are federal, but it's very unlikely for you to hear maybe even GOC, let me put it this way, or police commissioner saying that we have arrested 10 bandits. It is always from the government house.
Yeah, but the military, you know, they hold these bi-weekly briefings, and during those briefings they do share. But my point is, in the manner that Kaduna State government releases its reports,
yes,
it is a structured,
with infographics and all that.
Exactly. And not only that, they tell you the sources of the information.
Yes.
And they also tell you in categorical terms what locations these security incidents have affected. Now, what does that do? First off, it provides an alternative means for the analysis of security incidents within the state.
Yes.
Ordinarily, if you sit and you just listen to the media, you would think Southern Kaduna is the only part of Kaduna that is being...
Yes. Is it because they have the mouth to shout louder?
Well, that, and then the fact that attacks in Southern Kaduna supports the narrative that it is a religious or ethnic.
And people latch on that, including the media.
Sadly. But what Kaduna State government has done is for anyone who is logical, who does not want to fall into the trap of what in religion we call the ignorant, then he or she would pick that report, and you would see that the Northern Senatorial District,
yes, in terms of abduction,
Chikun, Igabi, and I can't remember, I think Birningwari, those are these local governments that have the highest rate of attacks. Yes, the rates of attack in Southern Kaduna is worrisome, no doubt.
One life is very important.
Exactly.
Yeah. But just how you present it that matters.
Like I said at the beginning, you would think that that is the only part that is being attacked. And sadly, even international media latch onto that, portraying the incident as religious.
Certain people are the victims, while others are the villains, right?
Yes, and then the narrative that is about land grabbing. By the time you read that report, you now see that no, land grabbing is one of the elements, but there are other elements: criminality, the existence of militia, cattle rustling. All of those are issues that are there in Kaduna. Now, why is that important? If you want to solve a problem and you don't even understand what the problem is, you're not going to be able to solve it. You have to look at it holistically, understand what the issues are, and I think that report has succeeded in providing that. What I am hoping to see, and that I didn't see under Governor Rufai, perhaps because they are not himself and the commissioner and don't have a security background.
Commissioner for Home Affairs.
He's actually a journalist, but he has done amazingly well in superintending that ministry by facilitating the production of this document that we're talking about. Now, how do we use that document as a tool for security management? That is when I will clap.
And that is the question that some people see a sort of naivety in Kaduna for all the time dishing out the figures. Now people are asking, okay, are you solving the problem?
Exactly. So that's what I'm hoping, that the governor-elect, who incidentally is a close ally of Governor Rufai, will move a step further. I'll urge him strongly to maintain that production, but take it further. What do I mean take it further? Use it as a tool for security risk
the document.
Management.
Okay.
I think I'll stop here.
No, continue.
He knows,
it's your day.
Me. If he wants
day.
that,
okay.
I'm happy to make it available.
Okay, you don't want to divulge it.
It's my tools and secrets of my profession.
Okay.
And
so he needs to actually...
The only reason why I pay bills is because of that. But my point is, it's a good tool.
Okay.
But we need to use that tool.
But are you commending him for what he has been doing over the years now?
I'm commending him for creating the template that has allowed that. And I urge all state governments to also key into that. Now, just to give you a hint of when I say use it as a tool, during state security council meetings, I expect that document to be put on the table.
All right.
I have given you XYZ money at the beginning of the year. This is the number of abductions. This is the number of fatalities. I want you to bring it down. And at the end of a quarter, at the end of
give
a
timeline.
Year. Exactly.
And he should also use carrot and stick. Okay, now the big question. What will be Buhari's legacy? In terms of security, specifically.
We can approach it from a couple of angles. Security sector governance. There is room for improvement, and I've talked about it earlier on. Fatalities, sadly, there is room for improvement. Last year...
Are you making some comparisons with maybe casualty during the previous...
I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
Under Goodluck Jonathan, his last year in office, Nigeria, one of the non-state armed groups in Nigeria, got the universal acclaim of being the world's deadliest terrorist group. That is the Jamaat al-Dawat wal-Jihad. In that year, 13,000 Nigerians were killed. Wow. Now, throughout the Buhari administration, the highest number that were killed in a year was last year, when it reached 12,000. And when we looked closely, we saw that a lot of the fatalities were related to political activities that led not necessarily terrorism. The type of terrorism that led to the 13,000 deaths have been brought down significantly by the Buhari administration. If we single that out alone, the figure would remain to around 2,000. So throughout the Buhari administration, he succeeded in containing, to a larger extent, Islamist jihadist terrorism. What happened, however, is that new threats emerged.
Were they sleeping?
Exactly, and that is where security sector governance now will play a role. And I'm hoping that the incoming administration would see security sector governance from that role. There are two things that security sector governance would do. Accountability.
Okay.
It's very important.
You have to account for your actions and inactions.
You have to hold those that you appoint to account. If you appoint a Inspector General of Police, on the day you appoint him, if you have metrics, you see data, all leaders should embrace data. They should have a monitoring and evaluation component within the presidency.
And they shouldn't fear to use data, because I think they are afraid of data.
So have a monitoring and evaluation component within the presidency that provides them data on this type of issues, that develop KPIs, key performance indicators. The Ministry of Budget and Planning should be doing that.
Okay.
So they should work closely with that ministry and make sure that when the IG is appointed, let's say an abduction rate of 7,000 was what we are recording.
Yeah.
Now they should give him a timeline of 6 months to bring that 7,000 to, let's say, 1,000.
And if he did not, he should be sacked.
Exactly.
Because there are other capable hands that can do that.
And that is what security sector governance will do.
So the claim that if you change them, it's like you are obstructing the security architecture is invalid.
If you have a security sector governance that recognizes continuity and sustainability, you can change anybody.
Anytime.
The system is what matters, not the individual. So have a security sector governance that is system-based and not individual-based, where individuals who are weak and unable to fulfill their job responsibilities, you change them. Because we're talking of lives.
Yeah.
Mala Hamza, I would like to drive my car today from Abuja to my state, Sokoto, which I used to do before. Stop in Funtua, pray. There is a place where they sell sire.
But you can't.
Buy, enjoy it, and then move. I can't remember when last I did that.
Very sad. Dr. Kabiru Adamu, thank you very much for your informed perspective. You have laid it bare. It's like maybe free consultancy for the incoming administration. I hope they heed some of the advices.
I hope so too.
You render. Well, thank you for coming to the program.
Thank you for having me.
And viewers, that's a wrap on today's edition. Thank you for watching. Join us again for another interesting package. Bye-bye for now. I'm Hamza Idris.